Hello, everyone, and welcome to ELSAConnect. This is a virtual forum that we began when the pandemic came upon us, and we conceived and we commenced from mid-March. Basically, a forum for ELSAs, which is the ELSA Alumni Association, to connect and engage with the community. And since then, it has grown worldwide. This is a milestone ELSAConnect. This is our 100th session today. And who better than Dr. Meenakshi Gopinath to have with us to share our time together and our questions, answers. Dr. Meenakshi Gopinath actually needs no introduction. She's known to legions of ELSAs. But she occupies a unique place in the history of LSR. So she was there as a student, and then she was there as a faculty member, and then she's been the principal of LSR for some awesome 26 years. So we are so delighted to have you, MG, as we all lovingly call you. And she's also the patron of ELSA and the association, and been very actively engaged with working with women in spaces of social spaces, of conflict management, of peace, and more as we unfold, as we go along the way. I just want to add here and slip it in quietly, because MG is a very humble, very humble person, is that she's also Padma Shri, besides all her other laurels. MG, welcome, and thank you so much for accepting to come with us. And it's a virtual world, so I'm giving you a big, bear virtual hug. Thank you, and over to you to welcome you, if you'd like to say a few words, and then we can lead into the question answers.
Thank you so much, Vandana, and thank you, Bangalore chapter and the ELSA, network, the ELSA sisterhood worldwide. It's such an honor to be here with you, and thank you for thinking of me. And the 100th meet is very special. I don't expect to live till 100. However, I am so delighted to be here. And first of all, congratulations for what your chapter especially is doing to keep women across the world connected in a space that holds everyone together, especially during these rather bewildering times. And trust someone like you, Vandana, and the group that works with you, Nilu, Yumna, Sandhya, and Madhulika, all of you, of affording this very nurturing space. Only an ELSA could have thought of that. And you particularly, you've continuously done so many interesting things, new things, moved from journalism to advertising, to counseling, to training people in the corporate sector. I mean, you've been there, done that. And then to offer and volunteer your time for the well-being of so many people makes a very special contribution to all of us and touches our lives in such profound ways. Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, MG. And I must share with you here a secret. MG has a great knack of turning things around. So when, I was chatting with her, I said, MG, let's talk about you. She said, no, I want to get to know you, right? So as you see now, she's spoken more about me, and I'm hoping now the rest of the session, we will focus on her. So, but thank you. I'm very humbled, MG, that you, said that I should curate and moderate your session. It means a lot. Thank you very much from my heart. So the title of our today's session is A Space of Our Own. And the moment, you suggested it resonated, it was beautiful. But I want to ask you, would you elaborate on that? And what exactly does a space of our own mean to you?
Well, A space of our own always invokes or evokes the image or the phrase, the magic of LSR. Now, this particular phrase, the magic of LSR, as Vandana Kohli will share with you, has actually passed into the vocabulary of all ELSAs. I think it was coined sometime in the early 2000s. Just building on our, our commitment to a space that is truly, truly something like something that is like an unusual, a very rare, a very unique experience. It's the totality of an experience that we call the magic of LSR. And there's something really remarkable about that space because it's about the zest, the energy, the quest, women finding voice, women finding their identity, coming in there to discover themselves, to connect with other women and the world outside, sometimes finding voice in new and unique ways, finding themselves in new and unique ways, getting lost again, standing up again, walking again, running again. It's a space of 100,000 experiences, each like a palimpsest, one on top of the other, yielding a layer, a tapestry that is so magnificent. You can only call it a space of one's own. And yet it's not really a exclusive space. It's a very inclusive space. And I think that's what makes it special. This inclusivity that we've sort of collectively built upon over so many years, so many decades. And the interesting thing about this space is that while it builds on the vision of its founders, it's gone way beyond that. It's the work of generations. And therefore, I always say that LSR is a space such as that. LSR is a space like no other. It is a very unique, it's like a Camelot. You know, in our imagination, it's like a Camelot. And I'm not exaggerating. Several young women who have gone out of the portals of this space, come back and talk about how it still occupies a very special, a unique, I call it a sacred space in their hearts. It also has this ability to continuously reinvent itself. And when I say that, for example, we talk about LSR, right? When LSR began in 1956, and if you'll give me permission to go a little into the history of our shared space. It started in a small little school in Daryaganj in 1956. And at that time, when Sir Sri Ram had this vision, he was often quoted as saying he believed in education for women, more education for women, and more education for more women. And that was his credo. He had already been associated with the Indraprastha College, which, as you know, had a very important role in the freedom movement of our country. But then when LSR came about, he began to give it his all and nurtured this space. So we were very lucky to have an enlightened board from the get-go. And that's always a very nurturing kind of feeling. And that tradition continued. Some of our alums like Vinita Bali and then Lal Kidwai and so on have served on that board. Some continue on that board. And so there is a sort of, from the founders themselves, there was this great commitment to women's education. Now, it started with about 400 students at that time, right? And it had this dynamic principle. A Parsi woman called Humay Dastoor, whom I've never had the opportunity to meet, but I've read about her. And she was just so elegant and so well informed, and she was an English person. And it was her vision, along with the support of Sir Sri Ram, that catapulted or pushed this initially very nascent idea onto the wider canvas of women's education in the country. In 58, we moved from that little shanty, place in Daryaganj into our current premises. And 58 is when our new building really began to stand and then began to stand tall. And if you really look at the architecture of that place, and tell me when to stop, because I can just keep.
No, please, this is wonderful, please.
It was very different from the colleges that had been established before independence. So if you've been to Miranda House or St. Stephen's and Delhi University, you'll find them. It has a little inner courtyard, and it is a brick building. Suddenly, what they call Indo-Deco architecture took flight, in a sense. So you have these large pillars and these open corridors. It's like the post-independence era, opening out to the world, not cloistered. So our building, which has, I think, 64 pillars, it used to be called Chaunsat Khambe, and so many Lal Divar and so on. So there's a book written on it. Anyway, so at that particular point of time, I think LSR stood for, by and large, Ladki Seedhi Rahegi.
And many other connotations also, MG. We will stay with the Ladki Seedhi Rahegi.
It was a safe space. It became a very elite space. People who were coming out of elite schools joined it primarily because their parents wanted their young daughters to get a good education, but they wanted to protect them from what they would consider the onslaughts of the Delhi university culture. Many people thought about it as a kind of a finishing school. And Liz has just joined, my dear friend Liz Sikkan, and she was very much a part of that collective journey. And I just want to acknowledge her because I've learned a lot from her over the. We'll come back to that later. So it was really in that sense that it was a protected space. It was a very protected space. It was, I would say, it was an elite space, and elite in not in terms of elitism in terms of ideas alone, but in terms of the kind of backgrounds that young women came from. Gradually, that began to change. Homai Dastoor retired in 61. Then you had Miriam Koshi from 61 to 67, I believe. She was a disciplinarian, brought up very much in the Catholic tradition. And her whole approach was to make sure that the girls behaved well, they were refined, they could have intelligent conversations, they could be good partners, they could be good support to their families, and yet that they did enter the land of the mind. And she was a remarkable woman in her own right. She was succeeded very briefly by Dr. Dhume, who was there just for a year, a remarkable civil servant who brought a fund of experience into administration but couldn't stay because of health reasons. And then you had the indomitable Dr. Luthra. And many of us were there in college when she took over. And she was there, I think, almost for 19 years or so. I think she came in 68 and she retired in 87. And here was this woman from Lahore, the famous Kinnaird College, Lahore. You all heard about it. Some of your mothers or grandmothers may have gone there.
Yes.
It was really, and Lahore in those days was the Paris of South Asia. And so women who graduated from Kinnaird College carried a certain kind of aura about them. But here was this feisty Punjabi survivor of partition who supported her whole family, who said never say die, who actually came in and expanded the college with several new, shall I say, disciplines. The buildings began to take shape and so on and so forth. She modeled herself a bit on Indira Gandhi, who was her hero. She also had that very aquiline nose and so on and so forth. Wore khadi all the time. And Liz will remember when she came walking down the corridor, there used to be the clippity-clappity of her heels, and we would all vanish, disappear into our class. But she was, by the time she took over, this whole notion of LSR uh, transmuted into leadership with social responsibility. Although we gave that acronym much later, but it was about engaging primarily what they would call social service in those days, engaging with the community, some outreach programs, looking after the children of the Karamcharis, going out into the villages. In other words, broadening the canvas of engagement. And that decisive, so there was steel and there was warmth, yet she was also very much in the traditional mold of how women must conduct themselves. Uh, uh, Although she believed that women must begin to think for themselves, and that marriage perhaps was not the be all and end all of a woman's existence. She herself was a feisty single woman who loved life, who loved the good things of life, and so on and so forth. Around that time, 1975 or thereabouts, that the Towards Equality report had come out. It was the first time that the status of women was debated nationally. And you had stalwarts, feminist stalwarts like Veena Majumdar and Devaki Jain, who spoke about the fact that women must find voice on the firmament of Indian democracy. Around that time, the demographics of the college in terms of the recruitment of faculty also changed. A lot of young faculty came in. And these were independent women who had their own voice, who had their own ideas about how they wanted to run life, and had their own ideas about how the curriculum needed to be transacted. About
And you were one of them, MG. You, you were. So
I was not
can
alone.
we move to your time at LSR and, a space of your own where LSR was concerned, as a student and then as, part of this dynamic faculty that you're talking about. And then, of course, as principal. Please share with us some insights into your association with the college.
Well, my association with the college is 48 years old. Can you imagine? So hold your breath. That's probably double the age of most of you who are there today present. It I can't call it anything other than a romance. Okay. When I stepped into LSR as a student way back in '66, there was a palpable connect with that place. I wanted to study literature, but I was persuaded by the principal then, I don't know for what reason, that I should actually look at political science as an option. And then I was persuaded, and probably it had something to do with my genetic code that I gravitated towards political science, because I did come from a family that was involved with the freedom movement and so on and so forth. And so there I believe, while I do believe in free will, I also believe in destiny. Something propelled me in that direction, and from that day onwards, I knew that there was an intimate connect between me and this institution. It was just a gut feeling. I got in there and there was a sense of deja vu. Uh, there was a sense that I'd been there before for some reason. And so through my many forays, I went away to do my master's after college. We were much younger. We were 16 when we joined college, 16 plus.
Yes.
Vouch for that, as will Geeta if she's here. So now today, young women who come into college are 18 plus. They're ready to vote. So there is a generational change there. Through all those forays, studying abroad and getting a job somewhere else initially and coming back again, it was like that song, पूरब हो पश्चिम उत्तर हो दक्षिण तू हर जगह मुस्कुराए जितना भी जाऊं मैं दूर तुझसे उतना ही तू पास आए आंधी ने रोका, that whole beautiful song. So it was really like that. So I don't know if you've read this book. It came out in 1911. It was called The Secret Garden. It a beautiful children's book. I'm not talking about My Secret Garden. That's a different controversial book. That's a Nancy Friday on female sexuality. I'm not talking about that one. But The Secret Garden, many of you may have read, is about this child who is orphaned and finds a secret garden in her uncle's home, a garden that had been locked up for several years, and how the flowers begin to bloom and she begins to hear music and she begins to hear. So each of us, especially women, we all look for our own secret gardens where we encounter spirit, where we encounter the resonances of spirit, where we see ourselves in different mirrors. And I think for me, my secret garden was and remained LSR. It was an enchanted garden. And I stayed there for so long. People would say, are you still at LSR? As though, almost like, couldn't you find anything else to do? But for me, every day, and I'm not saying this facetiously, was a new day. Every day led me to a new lesson, a new teacher, And I think it was the spirit of LSI I felt was walking with me. I don't know whose spirit it was, but it was there. Sometimes it would take a concrete shape in the form of a student who was feeling homesick, or a gardener who planted a beautiful shrub, or it led me into so many alleyways, or just walking down the corridor at dusk. It was almost as if there was this presence that was always by my side, and I could just turn around and have a conversation. I can't share that. Somehow I don't know if I'm being a little too sentimental or emotional, but it was like that every day. So there were two things that stayed with me, two aphorisms, both Greek, that you never step into the same river twice.
Mm.
Every minute you've changed, the river has changed. So each day was a really a new day. And the other thing is that what you leave behind are not what is written in monuments of stone, but what you weave into the lives of others and what others weave into your lives. And so LSR presented that continuous opportunity for learning, whether it's from students, from faculty, from the staff. And I just want to share something here with you. And that is about this gardener called Ram Sumir. You know, I said there were the teachers all around us. LSR was full of teachers. The trees taught you something, the students taught you something, the faculty, of course, taught you a lot. Uh, but people who were not normally visible to many of us in their own quiet way, contributing to creating this beautiful edifice. There was this old Mali there called Ram Sumir, and
Mm.
he would be working happily and he'd always have a tune. He was a bit like Chauncey Gardner. I don't know if you've seen that film called Remains of the Day. Very, very wise. Oh,
Okay.
earth spun, earth hewn, homespun, probably illiterate, probably, but deeply educated. So I would ask him, I said, Ram Sumer ji, आप दिन भर ये काम कर रहे हो, आप थकते नहीं हो? And he, in those days, used to call us Miss Sahab. I said, Miss
Mhm.
Sahab, इसमें मेरे काम में और मुझ में कोई फासला थोड़ी है. ये मुझ में है और मैं उसमें हूँ. And
Wow.
such a profound, I mean, you know, that was an epiphanic moment. And for many of us as women, when we see our life and our work as separate spheres, we begin to alienate these, uh,
Mm.
in a sense from each other, from ourselves, and so on. But the fact that they're woven together, and then of course the whole feminist thing happened about uh, the personal is the political. And to come back again after the feminist consciousness of LSR began to evolve, I'd say sometime in the 80s, mid 80s. And of course, the 90s was a completely new ball game, right?
Yeah.
Liberalization. In the late 80s, the Berlin Wall had fallen, apartheid had crumbled, you had globalization, you were still coming to terms with the World Wide Web. So a whole host of new possibilities opened up. And women's consciousness coming into awareness of their agency and also understanding the limits within which they have in the structures of patriarchy that they have to somehow break through. All this kind of constant negotiation, conversation, collision sometimes, colliding, coalescing. This was like a efflorescence of ideas and challenges that hadn't happened before. I think that's when, from leadership with social responsibility,
Mm.
LSR became let's start a revolution.
Yes, that's beautiful. And I mean, you just painted this picture which is just so vivid of all dimensions and aspects. And I'm seeing so many messages coming up on chat and everybody nostalgic and reminiscing those times. Because it's been legions of Elsas that you've sort of been associated with. So you touched upon leadership, MG, and you've, from what I figured, have always been a leader. You were head girl at, we shared a common school, CJM, and then you were the president of the Students' Union, and so many positions, going into that. What is leadership and women? Would you like to say something on women in leadership roles and give some thoughts on that, some suggestions? You mentioned also patriarchy. So, what does it mean to you, leadership? How do you envisage leadership? Is it like top down? Is it, why don't you come in on that?
Vandana, I'm going to take a leaf from Vinita Bali's book. I always dine out on her very famous aphorism. I think she coined it sometime when she was president of Britannia or so. And for her, she says, leadership is not a noun, it's a verb, it's a doing. And Savita, I know Savita is here with us today. Savita, Vinita, and I were on a forum yesterday, which is the Vedika School of Management, which one of our own alums has set up, Anuradha Mathur. Remarkable initiative that she's taken. And we were talking precisely about this yesterday. And Vinita said, from her perspective, she said it's gender neutral. It's not about women in positions of leadership or men in positions of leadership, but it's leadership as activity, as something that is constantly reworking itself, reinventing itself, finding itself, and so on and so forth. So let's not pose it as a man versus woman issue. Now, that's the way she came to it. Savi came to it from a different perspective. I would like to say I'm somewhere in between. And I think, for example, when we're looking at leadership, we're looking at leadership styles. So
Yes.
a woman can have a very patriarchal leadership style, and a man can have a very feminist, inclusive leadership style. So a patriarchal style would be very much top down, very much would be a sonorous kind of. I would say we really need to speak in the mother tongue. We need to learn to speak in the mother tongue, and by that I don't mean Bengali, Urdu, or Hindi. I mean the metaphoric mother tongue, the language of inclusivity. Because
Yes.
when you are marginalized as a group, you know what it means for others to be marginalized. So whether it's Dalits, whether it's people who service us, who work with us and for us, so giving voice to the voiceless, not giving it, but in sort of eliciting voice of the so-called voiceless, moving people out from the shadows of silence and despair, and to make hope practical and despair sort of unconvincing. I think that is really what, to me, leadership, one aspect of leadership would be about. It would also mean, it also involves, and this is something I say often, uh, while you are sensitive to the pain on your planet, you also are sensitive to the beauty of a bud unfolding. So while you feel the anguish of the world, you also have time to smell the roses on the way. And it's really about moving beyond the safe provision of personal gratification, like all of you are doing, and actually mingling with the heat and the dust of subaltern aspirations, trying to see what it's like as people are making a headway and breaking through. Whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's Dalit Lives Matter, to have a voice and a position on this. Now, it's not easy for all of us to lead a revolution. It's not easy for all of us to be Aung San Suu Kyi or whatever, or a Medha Patkar, or they'll even say Aruna Roy. It's not. But in your own way, whether it's a Rashmi Mishra, it's a Vinita Bali, it's a Tipi Kohli, it's all of you around the table, it's Liz, it's Geeta. Each one of you is a leader because you are blooming where you've been planted. And Rashmi's work with what used to be Prayas and now Vidya. I mean, these have resonances because they touch the lives of other people beyond just personal gratification. I don't know if Indu Sridharan has joined us, but the fact that she supported her husband to be the best, the most compassionate physician in the city of Delhi. So these are so the thing is to be able to know that we each have agency in the spaces that we inhabit, to bloom where we are planted, we are at a particular time in a particular place because there is a design behind it. You know, we are
Yes.
handed a deck of cards. How we play it is free will. That you
Yes.
might want to call destiny. But we always have the agency to play it differently. You know, there is something that the management people always say, you know, good managers do things differently. Leaders do different things. I don't buy that. I think it's a combination of both. It's both how you do things, but more importantly, it's what your motivation is. And I know I'm talking too much, but there was a study that was done at Harvard, and they found they interviewed several CEOs and so on and so forth. And many of them post 45 had had a coronary and so on and so forth. And then they tried to find out what was it that motivated them. And those people who said that their work was outer directed seemed to lead more healthy lives. So the questions to ask is, who am I, for example, which is a very difficult question. We spend all our life or lifetimes trying to figure that out. But what do I do? Who do I do it for? How does it impact those that I do it for? How do they see it? How do they see it? Not how I see it. So
All right.
these are some dimensions. And you know, I always tell that story about the stone breakers in a quarry. So I'm not going to say that again. But I love this story about, you know, one that Betty Ford once said, and as I said, I've dined out on it as I have on Vinita Bali's aphorism. And that's about this group of youngsters in a classroom. And they were told by the teacher that we'll all now play a game. It's a learning game. So you either have to be kings, knights, or wizards, right? So they all went at it. They were cutting their papers. They were making their crowns. They were getting everything together. When a little girl came and tugged at his sleeve and said, "Where do the mermaids stand?" So he said, "There are no mermaids here." She said, "Yes, there are. I am one." And she changed the whole rules of the game. So,
Yes.
so was she a leader? Was she showing leadership? I'd say yes, remarkably so, because she actually turned against the tide. So we get a lot of received knowledge about who we are, what we are. How do we look? What lens do we look at it with? Do we accept it, or as Socrates said, have we let thoughtlessness influence us and abide within us, or can we be that gadfly and look at it and say, no, listen, this doesn't resonate with my experience. I'm different. I want to be that way. I want to be loved for the way I am. And it's not just differently abled. We are all differently abled in some way or the other. And
Wow.
we
Lovely.
and
Lovely. In fact, I'm picturizing you almost as that little mermaid because, you were so young when you became principal of LSR. And your background with Bharatnatyam, you have a guru teaching you music even till today. And your love for Shero Shayari, right? So the artistic sensibilities that you have, MG, and you brought into, the walls of LSR with the extracurricular activities and giving it so much emphasis where education is concerned. And I'm not talking now, it's all a part of it, but when you took on and at that point to make it such a holistic education, I'd like you to share a little bit. And actually, I'd love you to sing a few lines or say a few couplets, a few words of shairi, if you may. I'd like to understand that part of you. And it's been amply expressed in all the the way you sort of painted everything so vividly with the words you used and the visuals that you created for us. Please, if you will.
well, I was fortunate to have had parents who believed that music, dance, and the arts are part of education. They didn't see academics as one phase and something else, or music. So I was very fortunate that they invested not just money, and money was tight. We came from a very modest family, And but their time, I remember my mother when I was age 4 would come with me to Yamini Krishnamurthy's house. She lived on top of a
Ah,
Nirula at that point. Sit through the classes, wait till I finished, bring me back home. So the investment that our parents have made in us,
yes,
really pay, or shall I say, not say pay dividends, but it becomes a warp and weft of our consciousness. So it's not
right.
that I voluntarily sort of chose to do this or that. It was just
Mm,
a natural sort of response to the environment around. And I was so fortunate to have friends like you, colleagues, uh, and peers who brought such a richness of spirit, a largeness of vision to even to the classroom that we shared, to the everyday workplace. So it was really a learning. It's not just something I brought into LSR. It was just a question of recognizing that we all have multiple intelligences. Some are
mm,
picture smart, some are word smart, some are math smart. So this entire canvas, how does it find expression in a space? And I said, it was a shared Camelot. So to be able to now, we had, for example, someone like Tippy Kohli who came in. She could do 5 things simultaneously.
ah,
But what was more difficult was to ensure that people like this would not face resistance from peers. Very often, peers can be obstructive. To
yeah,
ensure that you sort of open doors so that their natural talents can flower and bloom. I was fortunate that I was placed in a position where those opportunities or those opportunities could be opened up. I was just assisting something larger that was speaking and in that space. I just happened to be there at the right time. Uh, so, uh, uh, but today, when the national education policy is talking about all of this creative talents coexisting, learning outside the classroom, and bringing it all into the learning canvas, I say, hey guys, we did it much before you thought about it at LSR. Just go look at it. Look at
good.
what it has.
Yes,
And
yes,
now being put across as something very revolutionary and new. No, it was always there. It was there. It
yeah,
just needed to be recognized, acknowledged, that more learning takes place outside of the classroom with peers, with the struggles, with
yeah,
what was then a competitive time. But
yes.
and this whole business of the goddess with multiple arms, doing multiple things. And now, of course, instead of the trident and all, she has a cell phone in one hand, a spoon in another, a book in something else, and so on and so forth. So this Durga, that's
Yes.
in a sense, the sense that you have of Sar. And when you talk about icons like Saraswati, for example,
Mm,
we shouldn't imprison them within the Hindu iconography. But in a sense of more than Saraswati,
agree.
it's the vehicle, the cosmic swan that she rode
Yeah,
on. And the
yes.
swan was at home in all three realms, in water, in the air, and on land.
Land,
So,
yes,
how do we as Elsas we are at home in the world? You know,
yes,
we are at
yes.
home in the world. Wherever we go, there is a special something. I've spoken to a lot of people who hired Elsas, and they say, we don't know what it is with your girls. They come in and then they change the environment, and they're so demanding. They want us to go back to our tables. I know Savita Mahajan has done that, and really, take another look. And there is our beautiful Saroj, and I have to share something very interesting.
Saroj is waiting to say something to you, actually.
Is
No,
in
let her say first.
1967, hitchhiking had become one way in which we could get from place A to place B without waiting for endless buses which never turned up.
Yeah,
Saroj was our lucky talisman. She had those bewitching dimples,
dimples.
dimples, and a bewitching smile, and she was exotic to look at. I mean, she still is. Uh, And when we were trying to hitch a ride, nobody would stop their cars to pick us up or give us a ride. So we'd push her up in the front and stand discreetly at the back. All the cars come screeching to a halt. We would hop in, and we would troop in behind her. And the person who'd stop the car would say, "Where did all this baggage come from?" We always managed to use this kind of strategy. Now, today it would be called stalking. You can't do that because it will be akin to harassment. It's a different vocabulary.
Times have
But,
changed, yes.
that's there with you. So I'm sorry I
Yes.
spoke too much, but I just thought.
No, no, beautiful. In fact, Saroj is here, your gang of five, as she termed it. And there are so many of your batchmates who are with us today. Saroj, please come in and share something about MG, your friend, your classmate, and please.
Hi, Meenu, can you hear me?
I can see
Can,
good.
can you see me? So sorry, girls, I'm not going to call her MG or Meenakshi. For us, she's Meenu and she'll always be Meenu. So I must tell you something on lighter vein. One of the famous or popular pastime of these girls was to look for a groom for Renu and me. And one day she comes very happy and she says,
You're muted.
Saroj, you've
Please
got
unmute Saroj, please.
can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Saroj. Please continue.
Okay. So she comes and says, I found just the guy for you, Saroj. I found all of us, we were 18 plus, 19, not even 19 yet. And very excited to see this guy. And she says, he's in the Air Force and he is got a Scottish mother or something like that. And when every time he walks, girls soon over, and you got to meet this guy. And I met this guy, he was a gentleman, absolute gentleman. But I need to, please see me. He was besotted by MG.
No,
That bit she didn't know. Yeah, Meenu?
that's not true.
You remember that? Did you remember? I can't see Meenu at all.
MG?
I can see Vinita, and I want to tell her that I stole her line about leadership being a verb and about acting and not a noun. They all
So in fact, Vinita is coming in next to share, her. So when Vinita was in college, you were a faculty member, and so Vinita is here to share that phase, that part of you with Elisa. Vinita, come in, please. And if you have a question also for MG, please feel free.
Okay, somebody's unmuted me, so thank you. I came in late, so my apologies to everybody. But I came in when MG was talking about leadership. So I heard, her expounding on leadership, which is just fantastic to hear her speak on leadership. And we've been in a few, talks together. So you want me to share something about MG from our college days?
Yes, please, please, Vinita.
Are you ready? So I just want to say that, for us, I think I was in second year or maybe just in first year. Which year did you come back to the college, Meenu? Which year was that?
when I came back to the college, 74, 75.
Okay, must be 75. So that was my first year in college. And, Dr. Luthra was the principal. And we were already part of the student union. And I think Dr. Luthra decided that she needed some other people to be able to control our student union. So, MG was an advisor to our student union. And all I want to say in retrospect is thank you for trusting my driving skills, because for many years, MG was a pillion rider. And on the way back from college to my home, we used to go past Meena Bagh where she lived, and I would drop her off. So, and I remember how so many times your mother used to be standing, at the gate waiting for you to arrive. Anyway, those were wonderful, beautiful times, lovely memories. Um, you have really thought about leadership very expansively. I heard you speak about, um, you know, actually assimilating everything that is around us. And that took you to creating something called Wiscom, which does fabulous work. So can you share a little bit about, the idea, the spark, the concept behind Wiscom, and what is your wish? Because again, you continue to work with some tremendous people, and I think some of us were also present when you honored a few of the people and the fabulous work that they are doing. So a little bit on how you carried the leadership lessons into creating something like Wiscom.
Thank you for that question, Vinita.
Well, Vinita already knows everything about Wiscom, so this is her kind way of making me speak about something that really doesn't have a place with LSA. However, it does in some ways. I was fortunate in being part of the National Security Advisory Board, and I found there that a lot of the discussion around security and peace and so on was very, very masculinist. The whole notion of national power as a very muscular kind of thing. But at that time, I was also on several track two initiatives in South Asia, especially between India and Pakistan, and between several countries of the South Asian region. And I happened to be in these sort of track two dialogues and discussions. And there too, I found that a woman's perspective was very often marginalized. I mean, there was a meta narrative about national power, about how peace should be seen, and so on and so forth. And then I decided that one of the ways in which to go about it is to look at how women can articulate alternative notions of what it means, what security means, what peace building means, and so on and so forth. I was very fortunate. Several women and men from the South Asian region came together and said, well, then do it. Why don't you put together something like this? Why don't we put together something like this? And it was that impulse and that energy. And when I say this, when I say that, a feminist notion of leadership is different from a patriarchal notion, this includes both men and women. It's basically about connections, about how you build connections. It's not a top-down thing. It's not the father tongue. It's the mother tongue that's speaking. It's about, women's, by and large, a reality or a conversation that is inclusive and stresses on connectedness as opposed to what divides us, what separates us, but what brings us together. So one has to recognize differences, but build on commonalities. That's important for me. And I think when Carol Gilligan wrote her famous book, In a Different Voice, Do Women Speak in a Different Voice? It's about their Weltanschauung that she spoke about. When they address a problem, do they look at the problem differently and problem solving differently? I believe they do, partly because they've been socialized into a different way of looking at life, partly because interconnections are more important to them. They look more at processes than at what you call hardcore solutions alone. The journey often is more important than the destination. And in the journey, the connections, like E.M. Foster said, only connect, They look not just at walls, but at building bridges. And I thought this was an opportune time. This is a century when women are, after all, we signed the Beijing Platform 1995. So that opened up a completely new discourse on bringing women into the civic space and having them engage with issues of citizenship, of democracy, having a voice at the table. And international affairs and international relations hitherto had seemed to be an area dominated by men. And women were very hesitant to enter that space because it was all about missiles and armaments, and the vocabulary itself didn't sit very comfortably with them. And they were often told, oh, what do you know about Pershing missiles? Or what do you know about deterrence? And what do you... So the fact that they must engage more with these issues of international politics. And now, of course, we have the Sustainable Development Goals, which shows us that security rests on what are these so-called informal notions of security, what were called the non-traditional livelihoods, water, the planet, ecology. Vinita's so committed to the environment. You know that, I don't know how many of you know, the gifts that she gives the people she loves is that she plants acres of trees in their name and then sends them a little coupon and says, you have planted so many trees. I'm sure you know that. And what she's doing for the environment from sitting in Bangalore, what she's done for nutrition. Now, nutrition, the environment, these are not seen, they were never seen as part of the security issues of human beings. It was the military complex, you know, it was armaments, it was a very muscular notion of peace and security. So that was really the beginning. And I'm saying there's a karma chalta gaya aur log aate gaye. And that was
beautiful. Lovely. I'm now going to invite, as you know, my namesake, Vandana, but we call her now Tippe in that style. Tippe, will you come in, please, and share some, you know, your association with MG when she was principal and you were college president at that time. If you can unmute and come in, Vandana Kohli, everyone.
Thank you, Vandana. MG, it's been such a delight to hear you speak. You brought back LSR to us so vividly. I'm sure everybody feels the same. So, you know, Winnie, I joined college in 90, till 93, I was in college. And MG spoke earlier about a presence in LSR. When she was in LSR, she always felt this presence. Well, I want to say that when we were in college, MG was the presence for all of us. She was the captain of the ship. And she had such a presence because, you know, she would walk one corridor in her beautiful saris, and on the corridor that was, you know, perpendicular to it, there would be this flutter, and we would all know that MG has gone past. And I think there was that presence for many reasons. One was, of course, that she embodied a certain verve, a certain vibrancy, and dynamism, which was very encouraging. We rode that dynamism, we rode that encouragement, but more so because she held within her reason, a great depth of reason. It was a very palpable, and it was very, very approachable. And you know, whenever I think of reason, I think of Dr. Gopinath. And really, that's my question to her today. You know, it seems that there is an apparent deficit of reason in our discourses, whether it's on the internet, whether it's on TV, whether it's the way people are relating to each other. Therefore, as a community, for people who felt it, who've lived that kind of reason, you know, coming from a feminist space, and by feminist, I mean more the feminine space, as Dr. Gopinath says. How do we go from here? Where do you see FGS going from here to be able to get back that reason, to be able to nurture it, to be able to be it?
As usual, you ask the most difficult questions. As Vinita said, questions are far more important than the answers. You know, I think basically when you're talking about reason, I think what you mean is how do we actually live out our humanity at different times in history? How does it find expression? Does it find expression through empathy? One of the phrases that we use in the peace building field is to step into the shoes of the other. Many of our sages did it, you know, Gandhiji did it, and so on and so forth. How do you actually, how does that empathy resonate in your life? And very different from sympathy. How do you stop the processes of othering that have become so rampant in today's discourse? And I want to say, for any great institution, discourse is important. What what are the phrases you use? What is the part of the imagination of the academy? What are the shall I say, the founding ideas of, for example, we had that alone is knowledge that leads to liberation. That was one of the things that we talked about all the time. We move from limits to possibilities. We talk about humanizing, and we talk about equity, access, capacity, inclusion. Now, all of these today have begun to take on as rather sort of jaundiced, pale view. How do we resurrect that sense of tolerance, empathy, appreciation of the other? True democracy means this is what true democracy is about. How do we engage in the civic sphere as women so that we counter the forces of intolerance, of hatred, and you know, you frequent the worldwide, you frequent the social media space, but are we a voice that can counter this tide of intolerance is the question that we need to ask ourselves now. So when we talk about ourselves as Elsas, how do we jump into that stream? You know, it's not being better than the men around us. It's not building on a vocabulary that is lived its space. When we talk about reinventing a language and a vocabulary, what values are we infusing it with? What is it that our constitution gave us that we hold precious? What is our identity? What is our, and I know duty is a very old-fashioned word, but what is our responsibility to ourselves in an interconnected world? Because you know, you pluck a flower and you disturb a star. Yatha pinde tatha brahmande. So that the connections, the connectivity that holds us all together in this gossamer like web of connections, how do we celebrate it every day? What are our everyday resistances and our daily mutinies, which we need to engage in as women? Now, COVID is upon us. What has it made us more sensitive to the fact of the fragility of ourselves and our planet? Has it made us more sensitive to the resilience that we can bring? Has it made us more sensitive to the fact that we have many needs, wants, which we don't really need, that we can live much more lightly on the planet? Has it made us more sensitive to all the labor of all those who make our lives possible? Has it made us more compassionate or empathetic to the lives of those whom we barely see, the invisibilized, those whom we have sort of invisibilized out of existence, the migrants, those who are coming in? Do we have a responsibility to that planet, to that universe in which we dwell, but we dwell only marginally because we're not invested in it? Many of us are blessed with coming from backgrounds that give us a roof over our heads, a kind of. But do we have something, when we talk about giving back, it's not just about volunteerism in the old way. It's about a different sensibility that will fashion a new contract, a new social contract, which is which is mutuality and not just reciprocity. I don't know if I've answered your question, Tippy, but you always ask very difficult. It's something I really need to think about. But in a COVID, like what you are doing with ELSAConnect, you're providing a space where people feel safe, secure, can connect. I believe that in Bangalore, a friend who migrated to Bangalore told me that you provided an anchor for her children to find a school, for her to find help, for her to live a more comforting life. Now, do women bring that? Can we expand the canvas of our engagement? How expansive can we be? You know, there's that old thing that whole, whole, I'm forgetting that particular phrase, but it's a lovely one, and I want to read it out to you. Um, ये शियार अपना कदीम है, जहाँ रोशनी की कमी मिली, वहाँ एक चिराग जला दिया. A picture of me, हाँ. हो बज़्म हो या अंजुमन, ये शियार अपना कदीम है, जहाँ रोशनी की कमी मिली, वहाँ एक चिराग जला दिया. I think we all have to pick up a burden that we can carry. It's not given to everyone to make a revolution, but each one of us has to pick up a burden that we can carry and sustain it through our journeys. And it's
Wow.
the way we can continue to rationalize or justify our existence on this planet and are drawing from it all the time. I don't
I
know.
think you've definitely, MG, lit that chirag in all our hearts, and I think we're all ready now to, walk into this space of illumination. So much food for thought. Thank you. There are so many questions, and there's paucity of time. And would you mind if we extend by, 5 or 10 minutes, if you're all right with it, MG? Because the girls still have questions. But I have one question before I open it to the house. Is I'd like to know who's been your influence in your life. I know that you've followed both Buddhist and Gandhian philosophy, but would you like to share with us your influence, personal influence?
All of you have been an influence on my life, each one in a different way. Um, well, I don't want this to sound like a Grammy Award speech, but how can one forget one's parents, one's grandparents? We all sit on the shoulders of so many who've gone before us, all of us, each one of us, and we continue to transmit to each other or one another something special that when you are in the company of a kindred spirit, you draw sustenance and energy from them. But I can't but acknowledge uh, the role of my parents. My grandmother was really a remarkable woman in her own right, and my partner, uh, Rajiv Mehrotra. He has been I can't say he's been a co-traveler on this journey. In that sense, the LSR journey belongs as much to him as to me. Because at every stage, there was someone there I knew who was watching my back. And also whenever I sort of slipped, either in terms of the way I thought about things, there was somebody to say, listen, don't narrow the canvas, broaden it, broaden it. Think afresh, think anew, think differently. And what is it? What is the impact? What is your motivation? It always came back. And I think he got it from his guru, uh, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, that it's your motivation that determines what you do, and its impact may be something quite different from what you had imagined. But if your agar niyat saaf hai, if your motivation is right, then unexpected, unprecedented things happen. Now, I've fallen short of that very often because ego intervenes, anger intervenes. Tippy will tell you about anger. She's done a film on it. All these kind of, what they call the limiting emotions intervene. But that constant engagement as to, and this is, I'll finish with this. How do you become authentic? Authenticity is at the core of everything. How do you become more and more authentic? How does the gap between your public persona and your private life, how does that gap get bridged? How, as Gandhi said, how is that? What is the ultimate in eloquence? The ultimate in eloquence is when your thoughts, your words, and your deeds come together. There's no separation between them. So then you don't need words because you become what you say or you don't say. And so it's always a work in progress. That how do you find authenticity? Some people are lucky, they find it early in life. I don't know how many lifetimes I have to come back to find it. But I think it's a search. So everybody whom I've been privileged to interact with, I am a part of all that I have seen. As I think it was Milton who said that, I don't know.
Right.
Time past and time present is present in time future, whatever.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much. To all of you there, we're going to, there is paucity of time, so we're going to take in a few questions. I request you to really keep them short, and make sure your camera is on as you're asking. MG, we have Indu, who's again your batchmate, classmate, who's been sending many messages there that I would like to say something. So Indu, will you please come on, please?
Hi, Minu. This is on a very lighter tone. I think Saroj and Liz might remember that when we first joined as a freshers party, do you remember, Minu, how she danced? Do you remember?
Is Saroj there? I can't see.
Saroj, do you remember?
Suddenly,
And I can tell you, girls, that she got the maximum number of whistles that day.
She still does, right, Indu, when she dances to Jhumka Gira Re, when MG was here with us last year for our
She was
dinner, Nama Elsa.
amazing. She was
She was a
amazing.
young, she was
And
young
we were on the
7
stage with her minions.
It was just amazing. I don't know whether they remember. Do you remember, both of you?
Of
Yeah,
course, I was
sure.
part of it.
Of
I was on the stage with her.
Oh, okay. But she got the maximum whistles, I tell you that
No,
day.
because she was dancing. We were just, people in the crowd.
Yeah.
So Rose said we were clapping and playing the drums and everything, sharing. Beautiful, thank you. Sorry, may I just call Pragya Jain, who has a question to come in?
Myself. Yeah, can you hear me?
There's a lot of feedback, Pragya.
Okay. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Ma'am, I want to say that you are such an icon and absolutely a stalwart role model for all of us. And your $1 million smile, if I didn't see it one day, the day didn't go well. So I made sure I was outside your office to see your smile first and then go for my classes. So thank you so much. Just wanted to ask you, what has been the biggest lesson or the learning that so far you had from life, and probably the biggest challenge you faced, and how did you overcome it? Thank you so much.
oh my God, that's a very difficult question. There have been many lessons. I think the most important is that it's really what abides, as I said, is the relationships that you forge, and how they nurture you, and how much of yourself you've invested in them. Because at the end of the day, your profession, your money, your property, all of that stuff, as you know now with COVID, how far does it really go? But investing in relationships doesn't just mean that you're unthinking about them. And here I just wanted to, take a minute to acknowledge the contribution that Saroj, Indu, and Liz. I learned my first lesson in, if you want to call it leadership or something else, from Liz. And I'll tell you, in college. And let me tell you how. Liz and I, we stood for a particular elected office together. And, through sheer luck, and not because of competency. I want to underline that. Because Liz was far more intelligent and profound and really deeply thinking person than I was. I just managed to pick her at the post right at the end. But the way she came through for me throughout that period, when I was ostensibly what you call the president of the Students' Union, was remarkable. Every time I required something, I would turn to Liz. Now that shows you that, it's succeeding without vying, to be able to take pleasure in the achievements of others. Saroj, for example, every time I went on stage, she was there telling me, look, you're not wearing the right costume. Your hair is all done all wrong. And she would spend hours of her time setting me right, as it were. So it's basically how the warp and weft of your life is woven and rewoven and distilled because of the relationships and how you invest in them and how they invest in you. So to be worthy of those relationships is a constant struggle, because time sometimes it at premium, you can't reach out, you can't, and to recognize that those who have gone before you, you're really standing on the shoulders of so many, and their work, their commitment, and so on and so forth. So that's one learning. There have been many, many challenges at the personal and the professional level, several. And I thought that, to be able to begin to see them not linearly, but when you look back on them, you realize that each one of those challenges had a particular purpose in your life. You see them only in retrospect, but they all fall into a certain pattern, which at that particular time, when you're going through it, you're not able to see. So one of the things I think to remember is there's always light at the end of the tunnel. And to know that one has the resilience through the help of relationships to see oneself through. This is why, as women, as women leaders, or leadership in whichever way you see it, we need to re-examine our notions of success and failure. Because success is the ability to know that, to be able to become resilient even after a setback. So it could be a failure or a setback in a relationship, in your job, in your children. They may not turn out the way you had anticipated it, but each of them is a learning. When you look back, and where I sit now, I think I can say that after so many decades on this planet, that every setback that happened, which I thought was the end of my world, had a purpose to it, because it was building up for something that was to come later. I couldn't see it that way then. I'll give you a small example. When Dr. Luthra was the principal of Lady Shri Ram College, it's not a setback and it's not a challenge. She used to tell me that, look, you come, even when I was on study leave, she'd say, come and write this speech. And I'd say, but how can I get into your shoes, Dr. Luthra? I can't write your speech. She said, no, you jolly well do it. And she said, Teri Angrezi theek hai, tu likh isko. So, and I would crimp in, but then I would try and work out something. And I didn't realize then that she was probably preparing me for something much later. And I had an eye into the administrative world, which as a teacher, I was just not interested in. But that pain, or that sort of little irritant at that point, yielded something which was to yield much later. Now, in hindsight, when we talk about, we only look at our life as this particular life, but everything is leading up from previous lifetimes. The imprints, karmic, if you want to call them, the relationships. Why do we meet some people and we don't meet certain others? Why is it that we take to certain people and we don't take to others? Why is it that life brings us back again and again to the same space? As Eliot said, we shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploration would be to return to where we began and see it for the first time, to see with new eyes, to see with the beginner's mind. So we don't see, if we cease to see life linearly, then a lot of these categories of challenges and opportunities, they begin to have a new definition, a new dimension. But thank you, Pragya. The difficult question, I need to think about it. Thank you.
No, thank you, MG. That was so beautifully. I'm just thinking of this visual of the circle, where you're saying about non-linear, how you just sort of go around, you come to where you began, and yet it's this beautiful journey, like they say, fundamentally the shunyata, and, it sort of just says so much within itself. Thank you. There's another Pragya, who I think, Pragya Tiwari, are you here? She sent in a question way before. So if you're here, please unmute. If you're not, then we'll ask Manohar. Can you come in, please?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes. Pragya Tiwari?
No, Manohar, I think next.
Manohar, it says
It was
Pragya
me.
Jain.
Yes.
Yeah, Manohar. Yes, please ask your question. And may I request that, we are really going over time. So can you just keep it really, really brief, because there's some more questions here. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right. I had two questions, one for Vinita ma'am and one for MG ma'am. Which one should I go?
Ask MG's question, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So my question for MG ma'am was, what is the most significant barrier that you feel is there in female leadership today?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question.
which is the most significant barrier that we have in female leadership today, and what role do men have to play in it?
Okay, may I turn that question to Vinita because she's the last word on leadership. Vinita, are you there?
Yeah, we'll just unmute you.
She's gone for a cup of coffee.
No, Sandhya, I need help.
I'm here. I'm here. No, I don't think it's fair. It's MG's session. Let me not take this thing away. So, Meenu, I'm going to turn it
Okay.
back to you. Now, ping pong.
All right. You know, Manohar, I think the barriers are always internal. And I think because it could be socialization, it could be the way we have imbibed patriarchal cultures, it could be our own upbringing, it could be our fear of success or fear of failure. As Eleanor Roosevelt said, no one can put you down without your permission. So I think rather than erect a kind of vocabulary of victimology, we need to look at those internal barriers first. And then as we overcome them bit by bit, I'm not saying there aren't external barriers, there are, but our ability to deal with them, everyone faces barriers, not just women. Men do too. Men who aspire to be so-called leaders, it depends on what definition of leadership they bring to themselves, what expectations they set themselves up against. So I would humbly say, Manohar, that really the barriers are mostly internal within ourselves. I don't know if you
Thank you. Thank you, MG. Jumna, will you come in, please? And I think maybe this will be the last but one question because we're really tiring MG out, I think. Jumna, please.
Ma'am, listening to your voice is like Proust Madeline's. I think it's taken us all straight back to the corridors of college. So my question is about echo chambers. I feel like we all, it's so easy to talk to people who share your values and so difficult to talk across the aisle. So what would be your tips to engage with people who really have very different values, but are a significant force in the country today?
Yumna, I'm so glad you raised this question. Again, it's a very difficult question. For too long, we've been very smug, both because many of us, and this was partly some aspects of the intellectual left initially, and many of you come from that background, I know you do, had this very, shall I say, holier than thou sense of how right we were and how wrong every other ideology was. There was a certain smugness and there was a certain kind of arrogance to that. The inability to listen. I think the first thing to open any kind of dialogue is for us to be able to listen and to acknowledge that these things exist around us. It's only when we hear with an open heart, why is it happening at this stage in our history? Why is it being acknowledged and being accepted? What are the reasons? What are the sociological reasons? Not condoning it. Of course, but the countervailing force is for us to define and refine our own integrity and to see that we are constantly working. When Gandhiji was talking about his experiments with truth, I said this yesterday at that meeting, he not only desired truth, but he deserved truth. When someone was in his presence, it became very difficult to speak a falsehood, I'm told by people who were in his presence. So we have to be able to listen. Why have we come to this pass? There must have been acts of omission and commission. And then come together collectively. It's like Vad, Vivad, and Samvad. There are no places for Samvad now. You are either you're either black or you're white. Where are the shades of gray in between? And the fact that we always hypostasize someone's particular position and say, you believed this in 1962, so you must believe it today. Individuals change, circumstances change, they may have changed. So how do we draw out that? We can't do it without being good listeners first. We have to be able to listen. And while we listen, we also must be able to listen to the beat of a different drum. And if we walk out of step with our compatriots, so be it, because we're listening to the beat of a different drum. So I mean, it's a very difficult question, Yumna, but we all engage, we see the spaces for dialogue shrinking. We have to continue to open up spaces. We have to continue to also engage with people whose, it's like Disraeli said, I abhor your point of view, but I will defend it with my life, your freedom to express yourself. I mean, I hate your point of view, but your freedom to express yourself, I will defend. So that is really the essence of democracy. So we have to reclaim democracy every day at different levels. In our homes, we have to start with our homes. We have to start with engaging with people who carry so much prejudice in our homes. There are people in our homes who carry lots of prejudice of all kinds. Prejudice of class, caste, religion, belief, ideology. So that's where we begin, and gradually our circles of engagement will expand. I'm sorry, my answers are too long because I don't have answers.
No, it's just that there are many questions here still, but MG, that's so valuable. Each word that you're saying and expounding, is leaving us thinking and asking for that much more also. So the last question today from Anjali, please, would you unmute Anjali and come in with your question?
Thank you, Vandana. MG ma'am, good evening to you and to everyone. And it's such a pleasure to listen to you every time you're there in any program. I just have to be there because that's how you are. So my question, I have two quick questions for you. The first one is, I got to know
Anjali,
you when
sorry
I
to interfere, but may I just let you limit it to one question, please, if it's all right. Choose
sure,
one
sure.
of the two.
So my question is that, you've been a great leader for all of us and a great role model as well. So if you had to go back to LSR as the captain of the ship today, what would you do differently? And what is that one thing that wakes you up in the morning every day? I've combined my two to make one question.
I can figure that.
Okay. Thank you.
No worries.
If I were to go back, I would actually go into a kind of learning mode, because the young women who are there today are very, very different. What drives them, what their thoughts are, what their fears are, what their aspirations are. I would have to be worthy of them, because our students are far ahead of principals and teachers. They inhabit a different universe. Their aspirations are different. So I would have to do some kind of relearning. I would have to relearn, rejig myself. Maybe I'm too old to reinvent myself, but I would really have to go and again listen with an open heart and open mind to understand this new reality before I can engage with it with any sense of integrity. So that's what I would do. But thank you, Anjali, for that wonderful question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, MG. How wonderful. I'm going to invite Madhulika in. Please, Madhulika, will you come in and announce the next session?
May I do one small thing with all of you? I know that when Vinita does these sessions for corporates, and I've heard this from very admiring corporates who've been part of her sessions, she does something like, she doesn't call it this, she calls it the SAF goals, SAAF. She doesn't call it that, but this is a word that I've sort of put onto her. And that is that it's about creating goals for yourself for the future, and a lot of corporates do this kind of, and she coaches many, I know. So one of the things they do is that they look at the scene, they look at the actors, they look at the actions, and they look at the feelings, okay, that a particular circumstance evokes. So may I, when we close this session, request all of us, maybe for 2 minutes, to go back to LSR. Shut our eyes maybe for 1 or 2 minutes as a concluding thing. And go back to that scene, the actors, the action that was taking place, and your feelings. And relive that for maybe 1 minute. And see what comes up for us. What are the feelings that come up for you when you envision that space? Who do you see there? And who is around you? What are they saying? What are they doing? Where are you located in that space? And what are you feeling at that point?
Just you, MG, to take us into that beautiful, expansive. I mean, and and my besties from LSR are with us on the group. There's Anu there, there's Indira from Singapore, Geeta was in Chicago, obviously different time zone, but this expansive feeling of joy of what I'm talking of myself, I'm taking the liberty because I'm unmuted, of just being, just being. Thank you for this beautiful meditative visualization.
Come and protect us both, the preceptor and the disciple.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Really, I'm quite speechless, frankly. It's such a feeling. Madhulika, if you're able to speak, maybe you could just come in and announce the next session, please.
Yeah, it's always a privilege to hear MG speak, and just want it to go on and on and on. And however, I guess time is a limit. So MG is the golden girl from a batch of 69 in the annual dinner last year. So our golden girls are on a roll right now. All of us know and revere our Indian armed forces. Some of us have even experienced life in amongst them. We are all grateful for the brave men who keep us safe in our homes, and we salute them. But who is the wife of a Fauji? While the husband is on duty, do they sit at home? Do they have kitty parties? Are they planning dinner parties? Are they indulging in arts and crafts and other exciting stuff? From the outside, it all looks like a classy lifestyle. Saroj Ray, batch of 1969, Paul Science, MG's classmate. We heard her a little while back, another golden girl, will share with us a story of one such army wife, of the triumphs and the travails in the next ELSAConnect on September 22nd under Married to the Olive Green. Army wives are actually quite different from the popular perception that they live in sprawling bungalows, attending parties, all the above that I mentioned. In short, leading a good life. They keep, we need to also hear, how they keep moving their family every 2 years. It could be anywhere. It could be an exotic location. It could be the mountains in the north, the jungles of the east, the deserts. It could also be an exotic location overseas if they are lucky. But it's sometimes quite harsh and, moving children, etc. But the army wife is nurtured in chivalry because military officers are gentlemen first and officers later. The wife takes up as her natural duty to care for the soldiers' families in their regiment who are oft separated from their husbands who are away in their line of duty. So do join us on Tuesday, September 22nd at 4 p.m. to hear our Saroj narrate her story of tears, love, and laughter.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Madhulika, and looking forward to hearing you, Saroj, on Tuesday. MJ, I'm going to read a message from Vatsala Warrior, who's not in the room with us, but watching on YouTube. And she said she was the student at the same time as you were. And she said, I was English honors and graduated 68, same class as Poily. And I remember you as a vivacious student, lovely hearing you speak. I said, I must read that out to you. And, MG, you spoke to us about the magic of LSR. Honestly, if I can say this on behalf of everyone, it is really the magic of MG. You are the magic for us. And with that, we lead into a little AV, which all of you please have a look at it. Sandhya put it together. Thank you, Sandhya, sorry. And I'd like to thank the entire ELSAConnect team. Thank you, MG, once again for pulling out this time. And this is going to stay etched with us forever. I'd also like to give a big shout out to the ELSAConnect team. Thank you so much, Yumna, Neelu, Sandhya, Preeti, Nalini, Tanya. All of you made this really special. And lots of love. Thank you, MG, once again for being with us.
Thank you, Vandana. You've left me speechless. I'm so grateful to all of you.
You've left us speechless. I told you you have this knack of turning things around. Thank you.